Welcome back once again, NEC Hoops fans, for the latest NEC On The Run Hoops podcast. I'm Ron Ratner, here again with Ryan Peters from NEC Overtime blog, and you can reach him at Pioneer_Pride on Twitter. Ryan, we're going to go right into our weekend takeaways. Just looking at the standings, we see Merrimack still on top, then sort of a traffic jam building up behind them of contenders. What caught your eye over the weekend?
It was a nice bounce-back weekend for St. Francis, Brooklyn, and Sacred Heart. You know, the Terriers got their revenge on the two Pennsylvania schools. Impressive victories at the Pope, against Robert Morris. They never trailed in the game. They led by double figures throughout the entirety of the second half. Great scoring balance, 5 Terriers in double figures. And then they achieved the same type of balance against St. Francis University. They had 4 guys score at least 8 points. And Chauncey Hawkins, he really took the game over in that second half, scored 14 in the final 6 minutes. And he did it all. He made a couple of tough mid-range jumpers, made a three-pointer. He got into the lane a couple times, made his free throws. He was really a three-level player for the Terriers. And, they're showing off their great balance. They have a good offensive flow to them right now, and they have a lot of pieces. They have a lot of parts that complement each other well. Higgins and Hawkins are great facilitators. Unique McLain, we're going to talk about him later, but the athleticism just adds another element. Dennis Chelin is the best. I'll say he is the best post presence in the league. An array of back-to-the-basket moves. He could pass out of the low and high post, and he could step out and take a three. And you just have a number of guys. Yaya Evans is at stretch 4. Christian Roller is that kind of defensive stopper you could bring in off the bench. And so I think the Terriers are looking good right now.
You talk about Chelin. I was looking at his splits. He leads the league in field goal percentage, 61%, shooting 48 from 3, 81 from the line. Ryan, he has a chance to become the first 60, 40, 80 guy in the league, going way back to the mid-'80s when I could find stats. Not only can he do it on the inside, he's got a nice stroke from the outside as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's been shot selection. And he told me when I talked to him in December that he put up a lot of shots in the summer. He's really only taken open looks, and the bigs, it's tough for 5 men in this league sometimes to get out and guard him on the perimeter. So, like I said, he's got a back to the basket game. He's great in the high post, and then he could step out and he could be a candidate for most improved player in the league the way he's going.
Ryan, while St. Francis was getting it done in Brooklyn, let's go to your Sacred Heart Pioneers. Good weekend for them.
The schedule kind of turned in their favor, but they had decisive victories. I felt like in both those games, Central Connecticut and then hosting FDU, the second halves were never in question. It was just a decisive victory. Shot 56% from 2, shot 41% from 3, got to the free throw line plenty. They had a plus 29 rebound margin for 38 second chance points. EJ Anasicki right now, he's got 7 straight double-doubles. He's averaging 11.5 boards a game. I don't know, Ron, have you seen anyone in recent memory average that many rebounds? I know Jalen Cannon got to 10.5 as a senior. I don't think Justin Ruddy was quite there. He may have hit double figures, but 11.5 boards a game is incredible.
You'd have to go back to Darrell Vinson on Wagner back in 07-08. So yeah, it's what a season Anasicki's having, and he's one of the national leaders in double-double.
Yeah, so you look at Anasicki, and then this past weekend you got great contribution out of the role guys. Kenan LaRose, 24 points on 8 of 17 shooting. Tyler Thomas, 25 points. He was making threes, and he's also active defensively, which is why I really like his game. 4 steals. And then Aaron Clark, he is now the starting point guard for this team because they unfortunately lost Cam Parker to a broken ankle. He could be back late in the season, but right now, this is Aaron Clark's team. He's going to facilitate. He's going to start at the 1. We're going to talk about him a little bit later, but he had a really positive weekend as well.
Coming up for the Pioneers, the schedule does get a little more difficult. Next 4 games versus the Mount, at St. Francis, Brooklyn, and then home against St. Francis U and Robert Morris. It's interesting to see how they'll respond against some of those teams, some of the better defensive teams in the league.
Certainly. I mean, the Mount, in terms of defensive efficiency, they're the 3rd best team in the league. Robert Morris is the 2nd best team in the league. St. Francis Brooklyn, I talked to Anthony briefly after Saturday's game, and he told me no one teaches toughness better than Glenn Breka. So you go down to Brooklyn, you're going to have a dogfight on your hands. So it'll be interesting to see how this team responds now, minus Parker.
We mentioned Mount St. Mary's. The Mount had a bye on Thursday, but then Saturday, one of the best games of the season so far. Bryant and the Mount in Emmitsburg, packed house. Ryan, what were your thoughts coming out of that game?
Well, first of all, 3,100 fans for that game is pretty incredible. Great job by the Mountaineer faithful to come out and show their support. Bryant shot really well from 3. They had a 3-point barrage in that game, but they got consistent play out of their guards. They didn't get too much production out of Jefferson and Opoku, but they got Votto Morris. They got one of those vintage freshman year performances out of Votto Morris, 20 points. He was hitting threes. You had Chong Kui had 12, Gibbs 15. Gibbs has probably the quickest first step in the league. And then Habwe came back from injury to produce 13. He's a terrific role player in that system. So the guards combined to shoot 57% from the field. Impressive showing. And defensively, this team is really coming together now, Ron. The communication is great. They're actually first in effective field goal percentage defense in league play, first in block rate, first in free throw rate. They're not letting opponents get to the free throw line very easily. And third, like I mentioned before, in defensive efficiency. It's really progressing well in Dan Engelstad's second year.
Opoku made 2 huge defensive plays at the end of the Bryant game, blocked 2 shots in the final 30 seconds. The Mount has now won 4 straight games, 5-2 in the NEC, just a half a game out of second place. Taking a look at the standings, it's Merrimack still in first place at 7-1, and we'll get more into the Warriors later in the show. But right after that, there's a whole logjam of teams. It's Robert Morris at 6-2 in second, but only 1 game separates second place from 5th place, with Mount St. Mary's, Sacred Heart, and LIU right behind. Now we head into our Twitter timeout. Going to New Britain for this one. It was a great day to be a Blue Devil on Saturday. Central Connecticut gets their first NEC win of the year, and it caught the eye of former NEC Player of the Year, Xavier Mojica. Ryan, what were your impressions of Central Connecticut's win?
Yeah, Xavier Mojica, just congratulating his team on getting the victory, getting on the board in league play. That Central Connecticut offense was awesome in the second half against Wagner. 55 points, shot 51% from the field. They had 10 assists to just 1 turnover. They got to the free throw line plenty. Jameer Reed was just a man in that second half. 15 points, he did it all. You tweeted about it earlier in the week. Carrington Wallace was that rim protecting post presence that Danielle Marshall desperately needs for his team. And Tyler Rowe, the walk-on, comes off the bench. 10 points on 4 shots in the second half. He was perfect.
Next up, it's our under-the-radar player of the week. This time we go to Fairfield. Aaron Clark, I actually saw him play in high school. I was so impressed with him then. He has taken his game to another level, and he really needs to at this point.
Oh, you saw him at Pope John? Yeah, he had over 1,500 career points in high school. I love Aaron Clark's game. He's a versatile, crafty combo guard. You could bring him off the bench. He just knows how to find gaps in the defense. He could stretch out the floor. But now he's got to be the main guy. What we mentioned earlier with Parker going out of there. But the thing I like about Clark, he's not the quickest or most athletic guy in the floor, but he's savvy. He can do many things. He plays within himself. He has great body control. And over this weekend, 23 points on 8 of 17 shooting. The thing that Anthony Latina probably likes the most about Clark, 9 assists to 2 turnovers. This offense now is not going to be very flashy without Parker, but they're going to be steady. And as long as they can take care of the basketball, pound it down low to Ansicki and Spellman, I think they'll be okay.
Aaron Clark under the radar, but he's taking on a more prominent role for the Pioneers moving forward. We go into our Star Watch now in Brooklyn Heights. One of my favorite players to watch because he is a human highlight reel, Unique McLain.
Yeah, athletically speaking, running and jumping. Glenn Braka did admit to me on Saturday after the game that McLain's the most athletic Terrier he's ever coached. You look at his numbers, and actually, Glenn also said this. I'll start with this. He said that Unique is still not at his ceiling yet. He can get better, and that's a scary thing for the league because right now he's 20th in scoring, 12.5 points a game. He's 4th in the league in rebounding. This guy may be 6'1", he may be. And if you look at the top 10 in rebounding, he's the only guard on that list. Guys like Ansicki and Brahma and Bishop, these are power forwards. And the fact that Unique McLain is in there, he's also 3rd in the league in blocks at 1.5 a game. It's remarkable how good of a rebounder this guy is. I think he's gotten double-digit rebounds in 4 of 8 league games to this point. And as you said, Ron, he's a tremendous athlete. He's an asset for the NEC because you could showcase him at any time.
Unique McLain, a rising star for St. Francis Brooklyn, which won both its games this past weekend. Time for the NEC Play of the Week. Actually, 2 this week. We start in Brooklyn, LIU against St. Francis U on Thursday. And there he was, Jermaine Jackson Jr. with the big shot. Ryan, take us through this one.
It's funny, everyone in the gym knew that Jermaine Jackson Jr. was probably going to take that last shot. At that point, he had 18 points in the second half, so it was interesting. This is just a simple ball screen. Raekwon Clark sets the screen. St. Francis University, they like to switch on the perimeter, and Ty Stewart was just a tad late getting to Jackson, gave him enough room to shoot the jumper, and nothing but net, and that ended up being the difference.
That was one of the two NEC big shots on the night. The other one up in North Andover, what a game this was. Double overtime, Merrimack, Fairleigh Dickinson, two good teams, and what did it come down to? Jaleel Lord, who provided the heroics not only to send the game to overtime, but then the game winner to make Merrimack 7-1 in the NEC standings.
Yeah, Merrimack is just the epitome of good coaching. This play call, I love this play call from Joe Gallo, because Jaleel Lord, I think, said in your interview last Friday that they had two plays called, one for man-to-man and one for zone defense. So, here obviously Fairleigh Dickinson comes out in a 2-3 zone. They get Joyner the ball in the middle of that zone. Now Joyner has the option. He could go to Ziggy Reed down low. He could kick it out to Lord. It really depends on what Elijah Williams does. Williams sinks down to cover Reed. Easy path to Lord, and then Lord kind of astutely shuffles to the left to give him just enough space between a charging Jula Jenkins and then nothing but net. I mean, it was just the play. It was perfect execution. Lord just had a tremendous game. FDU was up 43-38, middle of that second half. They're starting to separate themselves a little bit. Then Lord made 2 threes on consecutive possessions. Then 3 possessions later made another 3, gave Merrimack the lead, and then it was back and forth. And then, as you mentioned, Ron, the game-tying layup in regulation, and then obviously the 3 to win it in double overtime.
Lord made 2 huge plays, and he was rewarded. He's the NEC Player of the Week this week for a Merrimack team that has won 6 straight games, 7-1 in the NEC standings, 1 game up on Robert Morris. This week, coming to town, St. Francis, Brooklyn, LIU, 2 tough tests for the Warriors. Time for our weekly Milestone segment now. First up, we highlight FDU senior forward Caleb Bishop, scored his 1,000th point on Saturday as FDU played at Sacred Heart. Ryan, talk to me a little bit about Caleb Bishop, what he's meant to the program, and how he's advanced his game over his 4 years.
Oh, he's been tremendous for Greg Herenda. He's an efficient guy. I mean, you look at his career numbers, 52% from 2, 36% from 3, 74% from the free throw line. And as a freshman, I don't think he made 30% of his threes. So the fact that he's progressed, he's one of the more lethal inside-out presences in the league. I just think back to Caleb's game in that NEC tournament final against St. Francis University, 20 points, 11 rebounds, 2 blocks. He really set the tone for that Knights team in the first half of that game. And he's been a tremendous front court presence for Herenda. A guy who, he was a local product, and he was fairly heavily recruited, but Greg was able to convince him to come to FDU, and it's turned out to be a boon for his program.
I'm surprised he didn't go to Merrimack with all the other St. Anthony players. They were all teammates together in Jersey. So
it was interesting because Bishop didn't even play that much on that St. Anthony's team because they were loaded. And we already talked about Jaleel Lord, and obviously Javaris Hayes was on that team, and there was a lot of talent there, but. Good for Greg to kind of find a diamond in the rough in Bishop. Even though he didn't play much, he could tell with his athleticism and his ability to go inside out that he'd be a factor in the NEC.
From one great player to another, how about Bryant's Adam Grand hit 11 threes in 20 attempts last week. He's moving way up on the NEC career three-pointer chart.
Yeah, 8th all time. He's within range now. Former Bulldog Deami Starks, and then Sacred Heart great Shane Gibson. You think about Shane Gibson, you think about 3-pointers. So the fact that Grant's almost there is really remarkable and it tells you what kind of a 4-year career he's had. The thing I love about Grant, his jumper, he gets so much lift on it. I mean, he just can elevate. He's so difficult to defend. He doesn't need very much space. His lift, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Shane Gibson's lift, a little bit of Junior Robinson's lift. But yeah, he's got a perfect form to it. He's going to be one of the best 3-point shooters of all time in the league.
You're right. He can shoot from all angles, unlimited range. Needs just 22 more 3-pointers to become the 3rd player in NEC history to finish with 300 for his career. Ryan, we go to our games to watch. Let's start on Thursday. Mount St. Mary's at Sacred Heart. I know you've circled this one on your calendar. What intrigues you about this matchup?
The front court battle is going to be epic. You got Spellman and Anasicki going up against Apoku and Jefferson. I mentioned, the Mount has the best block rate in the league, but obviously Anasicki and Spellman are the best, 2 of the best rebounders in the league. So it's gonna be really interesting because the Mountain's been very good on defensive rebounds. They lead the league. They clean up over 73% of their opponents' misses. Whereas Sacred Heart, they're an offensive rebounding machine. So something has to give.
That's a big game on Thursday. On Saturday, the NEC back on national TV on CBS Sports Network. A noon game at the Stoke Center in Loretto. It's Bryant at St. Francis U. Those two teams already played on the opening night of the season with Bryant winning. This should be a good one coming up on Saturday.
Yeah, two different styles of play here with Bryant. They love to shoot the three. St. Francis, they love it, the pounded down low, have one of the best 2-point field goal percentages in the league. Hall Elijahs in the opener was terrific for Bryant. 12 points, 4 blocks, 3 steals. He was a difference maker around the rim. Curious to see how he's going to do on Miles Thompson, Ty Stewart, Keith Braxton, those guys, especially when they get into the lane. And then in the perimeter, I mentioned Bryant likes to shoot threes. Adam Grant and Naduba. How are they going to match up against two of the better perimeter defenders in the league, Isaiah Blackman and Randall Gaskins Jr.?
Really looking forward to this one. All Bryant games seem to go down to the wire, so I hope this one does as well. We'll be on CBS Sports Network, noon on Saturday. Aside from the Bryant SFU game on CBS Sports Network, all 9 other league games will be available on NEC Front Row for free and on the NEC On the Run series of mobile apps for iOS and Android devices. That's a wrap for this week's NEC On the Run podcast. I want to thank, as always, Ryan Peters for joining us in studio, as well as our producer, Kyle Turner, who does such a great job putting this show together each week. I'm Ron Ratner. We'll see you next week with more NEC On the Run.